everyone, and welcome to our second interview on the ISPD Expert Series. I'm Soumya, your host and a medical student with a passion for pediatric dermatology. Please follow our page for more Peds Derm information, interviews, and up-to-date tips from the world's leading pediatric dermatologists. Our second guest on the series is Dr. Ramon Grimalt. Thank you so much for being here today. Where are you zooming in from?
I'm now in my university in Barcelona, just finishing the meeting from the last semester of the year. So looking forward a short vacation in summertime.
Awesome, great. Well, I think we would like to start off the interview. If you could just tell us a little bit about your educational background and what inspired you to specialize in pediatric dermatology.
Okay, I studied medicine in Barcelona, and during my fifth year, I decided to do a rotation in Chicago at the University of Illinois. At that moment, Lawrence Solomon was the chief of the department of that. So I started learning pediatric dermatology from him. Then I went back to Barcelona and I did my training on pediatric dermatology in Italy, in Milano, with Ruggero Caputo. It was my boss, and with Carlo Gelmetti, he was my boss and my friend, and we still have a very close contact. And after 5 years in Milano, I came back to Barcelona. Well, I'm still now here 30 years later than that.
Great. Okay, so you've been practicing pediatric dermatology for more than 30 years now, right?
I think so, yes.
Awesome. And then, so you would say that what region do you usually like to practice?
Yes, I don't go to Italy anymore just for
Oh,
meetings and sometimes just to see some friends in a short interviews in hospitals or to see some special patients. But I do not practice in Italy. I just practice in Barcelona right now. And I
okay.
have to admit that unfortunately, I also see adult patients. So I prefer to see children, but I also see some hair patients. I am specialized on hair problems in children, but I also see hair problems in adults. So I am a general dermatologist that looking forward to seeing more pediatric patients than adult patients, but I see all them.
Very interesting. Okay, so in Barcelona, do you feel that there's any unique aspects of dermatology compared to other cities or countries around the world, or is it pretty similar that you've seen to your colleagues around the world?
It's interesting. I was for a long time in a group on atopy, working on eczema, and we were sharing different aspects on the north of Europe, like people in the UK, on from the Netherlands, and they use these systems that they like to wrap all patients in.
Mhm.
And the type of patients we have in the Mediterranean area are
Mhm.
nearly never as bad as that. And I believe we are very lucky to have a special climate in this area, and the weather around the sea in the Mediterranean coast, and maybe the type of life we have here, that we are not so pushing and so stressed, will
Yeah.
probably help our patients to be suffering so much from this itching and scratching. So I was trained to do these wet rubs, but I've never used them in my own patients. So I believe climate in our area and all the psychological aspects that are probably harder to discuss may influence that we are luckier on that sense, and our atopic patients are not as bad as the patients we see in the Northern Europe.
Interesting. Yeah, the climate is a really big factor, I think, anywhere, because that's a huge part of any atopic derm patient is like the dry skin can come from colder climates or even where you are in the world. So that would be a great thing to study, I think, for the future. Is
Indeed.
there any skin conditions that are more common in the children or adults? Let's say like generally, any skin conditions that are more common in your environment in Barcelona that you've noticed, or is it pretty sim like nothing too major?
Well, yeah, I think we have some patients with leishmania with that in other parts of Europe they don't have. There we have a big river and a delta, and in this area, so some patients they get leishmania. But for the rest, I would say that we have the same. It's also nice to see that in our weather there's a lot of fluctuation on the diseases. So depending on the month of the year, we see all these type of patients. And then on that period, we see all that type of patient. And it's interesting. And I think that people living in the Caribbean on a more stable type of places in the world, they don't see this so much fluctuations regarding the climate. So it's interesting to see how patients, they come all together with the same skin problems at the same exact period of the year.
Oh yeah, definitely. For your practice in general, have there been any advancements in dermatology in the recent years that have impacted the way you practice and treat patients at all?
Well, indeed, a lot. When I started, we just had the steroids. We had no calcineurin inhibitors at all. We had no biology, any type of biological drugs to be used. So our life now, it's much easier and safer for our patients because we had to use immunosuppressors in high doses to keep our patients free of these severe forms of diseases in psoriasis, in atopic eczema, in blistering diseases. I think things have changed a lot. And regarding hair diseases, that it's my super specialty, I think we have not advanced that much. But with the new tendencies to use oral minoxidil in low doses in children, we are treating quite successfully sometimes of hair dysplasia and sometimes of very early onset of androgenetic alopecia. And it's surprising to see that we still don't understand why, but probably um, there's some type of hormonal influence on what we do, what we eat, or what we apply on our skin. We see a lot of children that are getting faster and faster in a hormonal change before the age they should. So I've seen plenty of girls starting in the age of 13 or 14 with some androgenetic alopecia, which was very rare, I would say 10, 15, or 20 years ago. So I believe we do something wrong as a society, and we are changing the speed of hormonal development of our infants because of some external factors that are acting as hormones without being really hormones.
Interesting. Yeah. And do you think genetics plays a role in these hair disorders? Like, is there a stronger role of genetics in?
Well, yeah, many of them indeed, many of the hair dysplasia that are some of the ones that I study indeed, and also on androgenetic alopecia. But in androgenetic alopecia in children, I would believe that in most of the severe or strange cases that they have an early onset, it's not so genetically determined, but it's an hormonal determined, and many of them would probably have a faster approach to the puberty, and this will probably lead to this faster development of the condition. So I think it's a mixture, like in nearly every skin disease, a mixture of genetics and some triggering factors.
That makes sense. Yeah. I've been reading in the recent literature that there's this big study on psych derm. So have you seen that in these patients with all these dermatologic hair conditions, which is your specialty, do they have the comorbidities of anxiety and depression? Is that a common overlap you see in these patients by chance?
Yes, a lot. And I was part of also the SDAP, the European Society of uh, Psychiatry and Psychology, and we work a lot on these factors. And in fact, I love to take care of the mood of our patients. And I like to use expression I learned from an old professor that we, as dermatologists, we need to use our third ear. So we listen our patients with our ears, but we can feel how they are because of this third ear. And this third ear will allow you to tell which patient needs to be taken more seriously, even if you don't see physically that much problem. It's like with itch. Some patients refer a lot of itch, but you look at them and you don't see any skin condition that should be so itchy. But if they are suffering so much because of that, probably they are not feeling well. So it's our job as doctors to try to improve the quality of life of our patients, not to try to distinguish if they are as ill as they say,
Mhm.
because if they feel ill, they need to be treated. And I think with more subjective factors like acne or androgenetic alopecia, it's our job to approach the patient using this third ear and trying to understand how they feel about the condition. And some patients just with these two small pustules, they feel awful, and others may arrive with the face full of bumps, and I don't care at all, and they will show you just a plant of wort. So I think it's rather important to be able to approach them properly and try to change our way of being objective, because in skin diseases sometimes it's not good for the patient to compare them. Oh, you are not so ill, so you don't need that treatment. But I think that many of them need to be approached personally and using this more holistic approach, as you were saying, or this my psychosomatic approach of better understanding how they feel.
Interesting. And what about like when really young children are fearful or anxious in the patient room? How do you try to get those patients involved in their own care and
Yeah, that is a very interesting question, and I think it's very tricky. And I think it's a lot of years of seeing patients every day, every day, every day, that you learn how to do it. I smile a lot to them. I try to make small jokes. I try to touch them a little bit on the belly or whatever. And I think if they forgot a little bit that they are in front of a doctor that will explore them, this helps. And if I can, I like to see patients without my coat. So this also make them feel that you are not in front of someone who will use a vaccination or something like
yeah.
that. So I think this type of a more funny or approach, or more trying to be more sympathetic, I think it's the way we do. But I think we all develop our way to approach patients, and everyone has his own style. But I think smiling and being friendly and not going straight to touch them, I think it's a secret. Yeah.
Awesome. So I was curious because this is my first time really getting to interview someone who's not from the United States, which is a really rare thing for a lot of people getting to watch this interview series. We're going to get to see perspective of dermatologists and physicians in different countries. Something
Mhm.
that we struggle with in the United States is barriers to healthcare. So what do you feel are some like barriers to getting treatments in Barcelona in your or that you've noticed in your practice? That could be that we would like to discuss today that we could talk about.
Yeah, I think in Europe in general, the health system is very different than the one you have in the United States. And I would say it's much more friendly for the patients in our countries. Most of the patients here are totally covered by the social security system. They don't need to demonstrate that they don't have money. If they have rich parents, normal parents, or poor parents, they can be seen by a general dermatologist in the system, in the public system. So I think this is very generous from our health system.
Mhm.
And the drugs they need, in the normal cases, they pay approximately 40% of the drugs. So
Okay.
if you need topical steroid or an antihistamine or antibiotic, they will have to pay only 40%, and the 60% will be covered by
Mhm.
the system. And with biologics or very expensive treatments, usually they get a totally coverage, so they don't have to pay at all. Some patients in our countries have a double system of insurance, so they pay the social security system, the government one, and they want to pay also a private one in order they get speed. It's mostly a matter of time.
Okay.
Sometimes they have to wait maybe 1 month to see a dermatologist, but if they pay for a private, they can see it the same week. So some of the patients would decide to do that. But I would say that the severe diseases, all severe diseases, are finally always seen in the general hospitals, in the public system, because they work better and best the specialists are there. So I think the system it's working rather well.
Yeah, that's definitely what, like you said, more generous and more flexible. And I hope that one day, like, we can eventually adapt some of the criteria that you guys have over there. I was wondering too, like, what's a really interesting case in your career that you like can't forget? Very, very unique that one of your favorite stories, if you had anything you'd like to share.
Oh, I remember a terrible case I had when I was resident in Milano. And it was a case of a child called Andrea. I still remember very well his name, and I think it will happen to you when you see special patient. You will remember 35 years or 40 years later, you still remember the face and the name and how the history was. He was recovered in our ward. We had a ward on pediatric dermatology in Milano with Ruggero Caputo because he had a very strange disease with a type of strange how you say that excoriations.
Oh yeah.
Or, um, we could not understand at that moment what was going on. It seems that he had some blisters. He was losing some material from the face in a very weird way.
Mhm.
So we thought he was suffering from a very strange disease, and we studied him for a long time, and he was dismissed and was recovered in two different hospitals, and then finally he got back to us, and we had to use a specialist nurse that was looking at night what was happening there, and it was a case of Munchausen by proxy, and it was the mother who was a nurse. He was cutting and destroying part of the face of his son, and I cannot show you a picture of him now,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
a very, very impressive case. Totally looking like a monster because of the mother was cutting little pieces of him with knives and scissors. It was an amazing case. And the mother was a very well-trained nurse. She knew exactly what to do to puzzle us, and he really succeeded. Finally, we catch her doing that, and the, the child was taken out from the family and was given to a social security system, and finally he's doing fine. But we really suffered from that case, and it was very tricky to find
Yeah.
it. I think that was my first approach to psychosomatic dermatology, and it was also one of the reasons I thought I need to be able to catch these patients with the third ear and to see when someone looks so friendly, and the mother was very friendly and was trying to be very helpful and was always close to the child. He never ran away. He was always there, trying to help, but was not trying to help, was trying to interfere in the way we were trying to understand what was that. So a very
Wow.
important case of Munchausen by proxy, terrible.
That's, yeah, so unfortunate for the patient and sad, but so interesting. I see why your study is now in psych derm, because that's a very triggering case to progress your career towards that, and very interesting too. I wanted to ask about the future now, just as we wrap up the interview. What current research or topics in peds derm are you excited about the future for?
Hmm, it's interesting. Well, I think in all the inflammatory diseases, we are in a process of understanding them better. So I would say that the treatment of these diseases will really change. I would love to see that vitiligo, it's totally well controlled in a not that far away from now, or patients with psoriasis or atopic eczema, or patients with more severe forms of blistering diseases are properly controlled. No? So I think a biological approach of our patients will have them in a better situation in the next maybe 5 or 10 years. I do believe so. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. And I'm excited for those topics too. And I've wanted to touch on this because you're such a big social media presence for us. It's so nice to get to interview you. And since this interview is going to go on YouTube and Instagram, I just wanted to know, like, what do you think is the role of social media in the future of healthcare, and how can we use like these platforms to really reach a lot more people?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question, and I agree with you that the physicians that we work at the university and those that we are seeing patients, and we should try to take a part of the social media, because if we don't do it, other people will do it that are not as prepared as we are. So patients, no doubt, they will check on internet about the disease we just told them. Your child has vitiligo. Let me see what's vitiligo. And it would be very good that the first page they found is the ISPD page that yourself has very nicely provide, or the Instagram approach of the ISPD explaining what is vitiligo, how should you treat vitiligo, what's the evolution, and now an Instagrammer, they do nothing about the vitiligo and will try to say, well, I use this type of cream and for me it works very well. So I think patients get very confused on social media because the people that get more followers are not the ones that are better prepared to explain what is it. So I think it is our job, even if we don't like it, even if it's a lot of time consuming, even if we believe that it's not as serious as it should be, but we should do it because patients will look there. So it's better if they look there, that they found us and they don't found an influencer that says that for taking care of acne, you should do this extra routine of the Korean way of doing with 7 different products. And the Instagrammers are crazy about the 7 Korean products for taking care of the pimps in the face. And we dermatologists, we know that they don't need 7 products and they don't have to spend a lot of money just taking care of the acne. They just need sometimes 1 or 2 products, medical products, and not so many cosmetics. And I think it's the same with alopecia areata or vitiligo or so many common diseases, that we should provide precise information that patients can be able to found it, and then they'll get the good information that we tell them.
I agree totally. And this concept of a 20-step skincare routine is so popular now, to have every step under the sun and like, what is the #1 product trending now and this. And I feel like it's financially so consuming for our patients. Like they can't afford this many products, and it's so important to have knowledgeable people like yourself at the forefront and giving proper advice. So to all our followers, please make sure you are getting your information from actual dermatologists. But those were all my questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview with us. The ISPD is so thankful for your mentorship and leadership. You're such a pioneer in the field, so it's so good to have your expertise always. Any last thoughts before we sign off?
No, I'm very happy that you have decided to ask me to do this. It was a great pleasure and honor to be here after Professor Amy Paller, which is a world referent in pediatric dermatology and a good friend of mine. And I would like to congratulate you because you are doing an excellent job just taking care of the social media of the SPD. And I wish you a very nice future as a pediatric dermatologist, that I'm sure you will be.
Thank you, Dr. Grimalt. So don't forget to subscribe to our page, everybody. Thank you so much.